Doug Smith is an author and sports reporter who's been covering the Toronto Raptors since their inception 25 years ago. His new book, We the North, is now available everywhere books are sold. Doug, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm good. How are you? Everything all right?
Everything's pretty good in our neck of the woods there. We were just discussing off air. It feels a little bit like Groundhog Day, but we're all in it together, I guess, eh?
You do what you got to do and figure it out as you go along.
Exactly. Every day is something new. But I mean, 25 years now, the Raptors have been around, which it seems like it both went by in the blink of an eye and has also had periods where it sort of dragged along as well there. Does, it seemed like just yesterday they were an expansion franchise to you?
Well, no, because I lived through those years that one year took 3 years, kind of thing. So it feels like every one of the 25 years. The last 5 or 6, when they've been really good, have been kind of quick, but those first 12, 14, 15, they were long years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you remember what your first article was covering the team looking back on it?
No, I was working for Canadian Press during the bidding process, and it was probably, well, like, which group will get a team, and then it was like, okay, will it work if it gets here? And that was the kind of the big concern. It was the first, I guess, the first big pro sports expansion franchise in Canada since the '77 Blue Jays.
Mhm.
So we didn't know at that point. You were trying to talk to experts. Will it fly? Can two winter sports teams exist in Toronto, kind of thing? And that was there were legitimate questions.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned it already. It did sort of drag by, and that there were some lean years at the beginning, but probably one of the periods in Raptors history that gets the most overlooked because there wasn't, as much success on the court there was sort of that pre-Vince Carter era there. Looking back on it now, what do you remember about that era? What stands out to you about those first couple seasons for the franchise?
Well, Damon Stoudemire was a brilliant player. He never, I don't think, quite ever got his due because he left after just 2.5 seasons. So never really had a chance to appreciate him all that much here. But it was predictably tumultuous, up
Yeah.
and down. Things looked horrible, then they looked great, and then it was like a big business shaking itself out. And there was a lot of ups and downs, and a lot of periods where you didn't know whether it would survive long term, who would own it, what it would look like, whether the Leafs and Raptors could ever come together. But it was, I think, predictable. I think anytime any major business starts, you're going to have hiccups and bumps. I remember David Stern telling us, boy, in the late '90s, that all this stuff that's going on there, that's normal. It's normal in startups of large businesses, and you hope it evens out at the end, and obviously it did.
Yeah, yeah. Looking back on it now, obviously hindsight's 2020. But do you think if they had a magic wand and could have had a do-over or two from those first couple of years, what stands out as some of the maybe rookie mistakes that they made in those first years of the franchise there?
I think early in the process, they thought that they could exist in Toronto, having with two arenas for two sports teams in the winter. The Leafs, I don't know, Leafs would be in whatever Maple Leaf Gardens became, and the Raptors would be in whatever their arena was, and that just wasted a lot of time because it was never going. I didn't think it was ever going to be workable.
Hmm.
You needed one building under one ownership umbrella that ran both teams and whatever else came with it, and that's how you made your money and were able to exist long term. And they figured that out. It took till '98 when they did, but they did it finally, and that was the only logical thing. But it took a little bit of loss, a little bit of angst to get there.
Yeah, yeah. And, speaking of the late 90s, obviously the big sort of turning point for the franchise there is the arrival of Vince Carter. And he actually wrote the forward to your book there. And, Vince probably has one of the more complicated legacies as a Raptors player there. And, now that he is retired, what do you think the franchise does? Does his number get retired? Does he get a statue? Do they do nothing? Like, how do you sort of see the next couple of years?
I think they have to do something. I don't know. I'm not a big number retirement kind of guy because,
Mhm.
frankly, 99% of the team's fans are never going to get in the arena to see that number hanging from the Raptors.
Mhm.
They can't go to games. And if you do something public outside the arena or something along those lines, that may be a better way for more people to enjoy it. And I honestly, I you can't do something for anybody who's still playing.
Mhm.
So You needed Vince to retire. You got to wait till Kyle Lowry retires. Maybe do something for Damon. I'm not entirely sure because it was such a short period of time, but Vince has to get, there has to be some sort of franchise recognition honor for him because, you know, it's not true that there wouldn't be Raptors without Vince Carter, but he made them what they are by his sheer skill and the globalness of his game. He gave them a legitimacy with fans around the world that they didn't have in those first 5 years.
Yeah, yeah, and especially for new Raptors fans or younger Raptors fans there who might just not have seen Vince Carter in a Raptors uniform there, and they look at the numbers and they go, okay, well, yeah, there's 20 or 30 guys that are putting up those numbers in the league there now, right? But having covered them at the height of Vinsanity, what was it like in terms of the buzz around the team, and not just at home, but even when they were going on the road, people were actually paying top dollar to see him, right?
Oh yeah, he was a phenomenon. Like at the Beijing Olympic, or sorry, the Sydney Olympics, the World Championships, the things that he was at, the All Star Weekend, the dunk contest in Oakland was a seminal moment in NBA history. That dunk contest, it will be the one that people point to as the one that brought it back. It hadn't happened for 2 years before. They brought it back that year, and he gave it another legitimacy. It was like a rock star. He was that big, and wherever he went, on the road, at home, people wanted to see him, to watch him dunk in a game, to watch him play. And I think his impact here is kids played the game because he was on their team. And you look at a kid who in 2000, 1999, 2000, who was, let's say, 7 years old, who was picking a sport that he wanted to go play. Vince Carter was maybe the reason he went and played basketball
Yeah,
in this area. It may be all of Canada, but especially in Southern Ontario. And that's the legacy. There are guys, Jamal Murray is in the NBA today because he watched Vince Carter.
yeah.
And I swear it's the same for Corey Joseph, Tristan Thompson, all kinds of guys, Dwight Powell, who was here. Like, a lot of guys became basketball players because they were able to watch Vince every night play for their home team.
Yeah, yeah. So when you were putting together this book there, then was this something that you knew in the back of your mind, okay, I'm going to start filing things away leading up to the 25th anniversary, or did you sort of just block off a chunk of time within the last year or two and say, okay, I'm going to reflect on it all and just put together a book? What was your process like putting it together?
I always thought that there was a Raptor book. There was a history of the Raptor book. 25 years seemed to be the right jumping off point. And the quarter century is obviously a big point. The championship certainly helped. But when Penguin Random House and I started first talking, we didn't know how to structure it. We weren't sure what it was. You couldn't do 25 years, 25 different seasons chronologically. It just didn't work. Everything would too much would be the same.
Mhm.
And we need to find themes, people, issues, events to base 25 chapters on. It was always I guess it's been in my mind for 6 or 7 years, but when Penguin Random House called me and said, hey, let's talk about this and how we can do it coming off the championship, it was like, okay, let's get going. And it got turned around pretty quickly in relative terms to book writing. It was like 8 months and it was in the printing process, which
Mhm.
is pretty quick.
Yeah, yeah. So you just sort of mentioned, obviously there's players, there's coaches, there's executives who have had huge impacts on the franchise over the years, and the book isn't just obviously focusing on the playing aspect there, but there's undoubtedly not been someone who hasn't been a player who's affected the franchise like Masai has over the last few years there. And having covered them so closely, what is it about, whether it's his personality or his approach to the game, that seems to just breed success on the court?
I think his strength of will is uncompared to guys I've been around on this team. He knows they're going to win. He can convince other people that his idea that they will win is the right idea. He's not going to ever accept second best. He'll surround himself with the best people, and there's a forcefulness to him that I think forces people to follow him. When he came back in 2013, 14, I guess, whatever, when he became a general manager, it was very much, hey, I'm going to get us there. We're going to go there together. We're going to win in Toronto. And people had said that before, but I don't think anybody believed it like he did. And he was able to convince people that, hey, you know what? maybe we're not second class citizens at the Raptors. Maybe this whole crap about people don't want to come to play in Toronto, people don't want to come to Canada, people don't want to play for the Raptors. Maybe that's their problem and not our problem. And his will, I think, brings people along with him. And you certainly can't argue with any success he's had on the court. Denver before and then here, they've been nothing but they've been maybe the best team in basketball for all things considered for that 6 or 7 year period.
Yeah, yeah, no, undoubtedly there, and as the years go on, you can sort of see, especially the core guys that've been there for a long time there, they hold him in such high regard, and it goes both ways, right? He'll go to war for his Lowrys and the guys that he's sort of built the team around there. But as sort of the years go on, and Lowry keeps adding to some of his totals and stats and all that. How do you think he's going to be remembered in terms of the all-time greats for the Raptors?
Oh, he's the best player in Raptors history. I agree. I believe that today. I I say this often. I think he's the best player. Vince is the most important player, and there is a difference. But his play on the court has been, 6-time All-Star, 3-time All-NBA, 2-time All-NBA. He's the best player they've had because he's done it at such a high level for such a long time. Even Kawhi Leonard is an ascendant basketball. He's an unbelievable basketball talent. But in 1 year, it was 1 year. Kyle's been doing it for half a decade now, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down. I have no idea what years, how many years he's got left in him, but they'll be hard playing, tough years. He seems to become, I think he's become what the franchise wants to be. Really hardworking, honest day's effort, all the time out, always play hard, always play for the guy sitting next to you, and always win. And I think that's, he's the best player they've ever had.
Yeah. Well, why do you think he maybe doesn't get the recognition outside of Toronto that some of the other point guards in the league do who put up similar numbers?
I'm going to disagree a little bit. He's been an All-Star 6 times, and that's not just Toronto. That's NBA coaches have put him on there. I think 4 of those 6 times. The league knows how good he is. He's not a cuddly guy. He's not athletic. He's not jumping over people and dunking. He's not getting you 35 a night. He can be prickly, and he'll be the first to admit it. And that's part of his charm. It's part of his personality. And he doesn't play the game. Like, he doesn't care whether people love him or not. He just plays how he plays. And his teammates love him and trust him and follow him. And I think that's all that really matters to him. But, around the league, Adam Silver, when they started the NBA Finals, had his media availability, talked about the players who helped bring the NBA back after the shutdown. And it was Chris Ball, the president of the Players Association, Dwight Powell, a Mississauga guy playing at the Dallas Mavericks, and Kyle Lowry. Mm-hmm. So around the league, he has a respect that I don't think people quite understand.
Yeah. Well, I mean, talking about the shutdown there, Toronto is known for the raucous fans, and especially during the playoffs there, you've got all the flags on the cars, you've got Jurassic Park going on, you've got all these sort of shows around the show that sort of take over the city there. And obviously with COVID and not being able to get together in large groups of people, that sort of fell by the wayside. What was the atmosphere even like during the Raptors playoff run this year in Toronto?
Oh, it was basically non-existent. It was at the not the lowest point of COVID-19 or the pandemic, but it was close, and there was no communal. There was communal events virtually. Like you could see in social media people talking to each other and being around the team, but it certainly wasn't as all encompassing, and that's too bad. I think it probably cost them. I think if they get to play a game 7 against Boston at home, they win. In a neutral site, they didn't. But yeah, it was weird. But by that time, by August, people were so tired from March to August of all the stuff they've been dealing with in their lives and the disruption to families, jobs, businesses, all that kind of thing. People were tired, and you could kind of sense in those 2 playoff series a galvanization again. People want to talk about the Raptors because it was something that wasn't COVID-19. And at that point, we needed something that wasn't COVID-19.
Yeah. So, I mean, fan-wise, in Toronto, Maple Leafs are obviously a religion. Here in Ottawa, we sometimes think of them as a cult, but that's a whole different story. But, I mean, the Raptors, with their unparalleled run of success that they had over the last couple of seasons there, and the diverse crowd that they're bringing in as well too. Do you see any kind of scenario playing out where the Raptors might actually become the most popular team in Toronto?
I think they're 1-1A now, and I think you could throw. I think you could throw a blanket over them and not pick the wrong one. I think they are as popular as the Leafs because they win, and they are far more. And this is a theme we sort of developed in the book. They are far more reflective of Toronto and Canada than the Maple Leafs are.
Hmm.
Their base of fan is different, and that's the way Canada is different. And
Hmm.
Richard Petty, he was the first president of the Raptors way back in the day, used to talk about when basketball would surpass hockey. We're almost at that point in
Yeah.
this city. We really are. You just look at the people playing the game and where the society is going. We're there.
Yeah, yeah, and obviously being tenants within the same building there as well too. Do you have you seen it sort of flesh out as far as the actual corporate sponsorships or attendance in there? Are they sort of 1A 1B as well too, or does that sort of that last gap that needs to close in order for them to maybe overtake the Leafs?
Well, Maple Leaf Sports doesn't make much of its finances public because it's a privately held company. It doesn't have to.
Hmm.
But I'm convinced the Raptors make more money than the Leafs, just
Yeah, really.
because their leagues make more money. They have billions of dollars in television contracts in the NBA. The NHL would kill for that.
Hmm.
The NHL is still very much a local gate driven and local deal driven market. The Raptors are truly a national brand in a stronger, vastly stronger league. And I don't think there was at time back in '95 and late '90s a resentment from the hockey people who didn't want this other team there taking their money, stealing some of their glory, siphoning off maybe a fan. Now they're benefiting from it, and that resentment is gone because I think they understand that if one's successful, it helps the other. It
Yeah.
just creates more buzz and more people pay attention. And the Raptors are big Leaf fans. They want the Leafs. They want the Leafs to do well. They're not jealous of them. They realize that if they win, everybody wins,
Hmm.
and that's where we are in that dynamic now. I think.
Yeah, yeah. Why do you think it is that the Raptors succeeded where the Vancouver Grizzlies didn't? Does it just come down to ownership groups, or was there more to it than that?
No, I think it's basically ownership. I think that the Vancouver never got to where what Toronto became, where one entity owned the arena and both teams.
Hmm.
The Grizzlies were always a tenant, and were not in on a lot of the business deals that the Canucks and GM Place or whatever it was called at the time. I think it was GM Place existed. They had their own deals. Basketball was on the side, and they never got under the same umbrella, and that gave the basketball people a reason and a cause to get out of town. But if they had been owned by the same group, they would have succeeded for sure because you couldn't let the other team fail because you need those 41 dates in their building and you need their income. You need that. And they didn't that it was entirely, in my opinion, ownership issues in Vancouver. The fan support was there. The team wasn't good, but no team is that good early in its existence.
Hmm.
But ownership never quite got worked out the way it should have been.
Yeah, yeah. So looking back on it all now, if you were to put together sort of a Mount Rushmore of Raptors, and it could be coaches, can be front office players, whatever you want, who are your four that you're carving into the mountain there?
Well, I'm obviously doing Vince. I'm probably doing Kyle Lowry. I would probably put Masai on there, and I might put Isaiah Thomas on there because he was the first face of the franchise.
Really? An Isaiah
He,
Thomas shout out. Wow.
well, he was, he would go and sell tickets wherever they had to be sold, and was for 3 years till he left. And he left under difficult circumstances. He tried to buy the team when they had the shotgun clause, Bitov and Slate. He was not a successful bidder, so it was writing was on the wall at that point. But he did see Maple Leaf Sports becoming what it has become. That was his idea, his goal. He just couldn't pull it off.
Mhm.
But if they don't have him in those first 3 years selling the team and drafting Damon Stoudemire, drafting Tracy McGrady, getting the kind of drafting Marcus Camby, getting young players that fans can get excited about, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much longer it would have taken to get that kind of legitimacy. But I mean, he'd be certainly in the consideration for the fourth. That's for sure. But it would be Vince, Kyle, and Masai right now. You could you could argue Masai or Isaiah. You could argue Damon. You could argue Chris Bosh, maybe. You could argue DeMar DeRozan for sure, although he didn't have ultimate success, but you put him ahead of Bosh, in my opinion. But
Mhm.
I need a big mountain. I like a bigger mountain than just the four of them.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, what has sort of changed in terms of the actual DNA of the team from that scrappy little, new franchise to where they are now? If you had to sort of boil it down to maybe two or three things that have, changed from struggling to even win double-digit games in a season to the dominance that they have now, what have been some of the things that you've observed over the last 25 years?
Well, in the first 7 or 8 years, 9 years, there was constant change. They changed coaches every year, every couple of years. They changed players because the players weren't that good. The consistency over the last decade has been crazy. Casey came in 2011 and spent 8 years, 7 years, and then Nick Nurse followed after that. Sam Mitchell for 5 years before Casey. Like there was a consistency and a goal, and everybody fought for the same thing. Everybody was working together, and they stayed together, and that's what allowed them, I think, to thrive in the last decade. And that's a credit to Masai, credit to ownership, credit to a guy like Dwayne Casey, who didn't get the great benefit of it, but he built it. He came in 2011 and was okay. This is the way we're going to do it, and they did it consistently. It never changed, and that allowed them to get guys who fit their program, personality, and playing style, and they let them lose a little bit because they knew that they would eventually win, and they have.
Yeah, yeah, and you hit on something there that's probably an overlooked aspect there of the franchise is that Casey goes out, wins Coach of the Year, and doesn't end up ultimately coming back, and they replace him with Nurse there. Do you have any sort of insight into the rationale behind that, or how hard of a decision that was maybe for Masai to sort of pull the trigger there?
Oh, it was probably, well, it was the hardest decision he's had to make. I think trading DeMar would be close, but
Hmm.
firing Casey when he was going to win the Coach of the Year was crazy hard, and he liked Dwayne and still does.
Hmm.
But there was a point in time where he needed a different. They thought they needed a different voice and not a different direction, just a different attitude, and they got it in Nick. And Nick in his first year wins the NBA championship, but with a team that Casey had built,
Hmm.
with the exception of Kawhi. I would like to have seen Dwayne Casey coach a team with Kawhi Leonard and Marc Gasol, because I think they would have been just as good, but it was just time. But the decision to let Casey go was gut wrenching.
Hmm.
I know Manziel didn't make it easily, but that's what I think what makes him a great executive. He knows he has to make the unpopular and difficult decisions, and those two, firing Dwayne and trading DeMar, were the two of the hardest things he's had to do in his professional life. But he had to do them.
Yeah, yeah. So we've talked a lot about the past here. Now we'll ask you to sort of pull out your crystal ball and look ahead into the future. Do you have any predictions for the direction of the franchise over the next maybe 2-3 years? What can fans sort of expect?
Well, I think they'll still be very good on the court. They're sort of set themselves up contractually to have very good players. I don't think they're not going to go in the tank and be a lottery team in the next 5 or 7 years. They got too much talent on the team and in the pipeline for that to happen. I think, like the evolution of the game and the sport and the NBA, they will become more active in social events, social justice issues
Hmm.
in Canada. They'll be more nationwide, I think, with Indigenous rights, women's rights, anti-racism, that kind of corporate responsibility. I think is very, very important to them, and is their next thing that they want to broach. But on the court, they're going to be. They may not play for a championship in the next 10 years, but they'll certainly be capable of doing it. And it's all, well, it's luck. Quite a lot of it's luck. Kawhi Leonard's shot bounces out, and they don't win that series. They blow entirely up,
Hmm.
but it went in, and they win the championship, and everybody's happy. So as for competitive nature, they're still going to be pretty good for quite a while. They got too many good players.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we let you go, we got a couple just quick hit answers here. So looking into the crystal ball, do the Raptors trade up into the lottery for the draft this year?
No, they don't have anything that they don't think that they will give up, and the lottery's not that good. And you get a lottery kid, you got to wait 3 years for him to be good. Why not let your kid you got be good in 3 years?
Yeah. Okay. In the next 5 years, do the Raptors make another NBA Finals?
I would guess not. I mean, because it's so hard to do. But they'll have a shooter's chance.
Yeah. All right. Does Kyle Lowry retire as a Raptor?
No, I think he'll play this year with the Raptors, and I think he's got time after this in his career. And I don't think it'll be in Toronto because they're going to have to turn the franchise over to Fred VanVleet.
Okay. And last one here on a lot of Raptors fans' minds. Does Giannis come to Toronto?
I think if he leaves Milwaukee, Toronto would be one of the top 2 destinations, but I don't think he'll leave Milwaukee.
All right. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. If people wanted to find out more about yourself or any of the projects you've got in the works there, where can people go to get more information?
Well, you go to thestar.com and read me 7 days a week in the season and a couple days a week when I'm loafing right now. And buy the book, Chapters Indigo, through Penguin Random House, Amazon. The audio book is coming out. That's the Vince Carter forward is narrated by Kia Nurse. And the bulk of the book is narrated by Matt Devlin. And I'm really excited to hear that. And I think that'll be fun. But other than that, just keep watching the Raptors because I'm going to be writing about them until they're going to take me out of their feet first.
Amazing. So the book is We the North by Doug Smith. It makes a great Christmas present. So if you're going to order it online.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Now get it in time for the holidays. And Doug, thank you so much for joining us and wish you all the best.
My pleasure. See you down the road. Glad to be on.